In the shadowed recesses of ancient civilizations, secretive ceremonies unfolded whose details remain tantalizingly elusive, preserved solely through fragmentary accounts and veiled allusions. Among these, the Eleusinian mysteries stand as a paramount example of initiation rites steeped in enigma and harrowing transformation. Celebrated in the city of Eleusis in ancient Greece, these rites constituted a sacred covenant between the initiate and the divine, promising profound spiritual renewal through ordeals that bordered on the mystical. Participants were ushered into a realm where the boundaries of life and death, reality and illusion, were deliberately blurred. Though the precise nature of these ceremonies remains cloaked in intentional silence, historical fragments suggest that initiates underwent intense psychological trials, possibly augmented by the ingestion of potent, hallucinogenic substances derived from local flora. These substances may have induced visionary experiences, designed not merely to disorient, but to symbolically enact death and rebirth. Within this liminal space, the initiate faced ritual humiliation and symbolic punishments, acts of devotion through suffering intended to shatter prior identity and prepare the soul for its transformation. The profound secrecy surrounding these rites was enforced by oaths, and the penalty for disclosure was said to be death, underscoring the gravity and sanctity of the proceedings. Parallel to the Eleusinian mysteries were the rites of the cult of Dionysus, whose initiation ceremonies diverged in their frenzied intensity, yet echoed the same fundamental motif of suffering as spiritual passage. The Dionysian cult embraced ecstatic madness and ritual possession, where initiates were subjected to ordeals evoking symbolic dismemberment and psychological dissolution. These experiences, simultaneously terrifying and ecstatic, were designed to dismantle the ego, facilitating a union with the divine Dionysus through a controlled descent into chaos. The rites often culminated in episodes of ritual madness, where the initiate surrendered to primal forces, blurring the lines between devotion and torment. Such secretive ceremonies wielded pain and frenzy as tools, enforcing loyalty through the shared ordeal of suffering and the promise of transcendence beyond the self. Within the vast expanse of the Roman Empire, the Mithraic mysteries presented another dimension of secretive initiation, marked by a structured progression through graded rites. The cult, centered around the god Mithras, demanded from its initiates a succession of painful ordeals, including blindfolding, binding, and mock death scenarios. These physical trials served a dual purpose: to test the initiates' endurance and loyalty, and to induct them into arcane knowledge reserved for the elect few. Each stage of initiation symbolized a deeper passage into cosmic mysteries, with ritual humiliation often employed to signify the death of the old self and the birth of a new, enlightened identity. The repeated enactment of these ordeals forged a bond of secrecy and shared suffering, reinforcing the cult's hierarchical structure and the initiate's commitment to its esoteric wisdom. Concurrently, the Orphic cult, with its roots in ancient Greek spiritual practice, engaged followers in purification rituals that were as demanding as they were secretive. Initiates undertook fasting, isolation, and symbolic descents into the underworld, all designed to mirror a journey through suffering towards spiritual enlightenment. These painful ordeals were not merely physical, but deeply psychological, reflecting a metaphysical passage from darkness to light. The rites of the Orphic cult emphasized the soul's immortality and the necessity of purification through trial, with secret knowledge imparted only to those who endured the rigors of initiation. The ritual humiliation embedded within these ceremonies served as a crucible, breaking down the initiate's previous identity to allow for a rebirth into a sanctified existence. The cult of Isis, prominent in both Egypt and later Rome, likewise engaged in secretive rites that combined symbolic death and resurrection, evoking the mythic narrative of the goddess herself. Initiation into this cult likely involved sensory deprivation and ritual punishment, designed to sever the initiate from their mundane existence and rebirth them into a sacred life aligned with the divine Isis. These ceremonies, while less documented in explicit detail, are understood to have been profound acts of devotion through suffering, where the initiate's endurance of pain and humiliation was a testament to their spiritual commitment. The secrecy enveloping these rites reinforced the cult's mystical allure and its emphasis on personal transformation through trial. Among the most chaotic and violent initiations were those practiced by the Bakshik cults, whose rites were notorious for their public frenzy and symbolic destruction of the self. These ceremonies often involved episodes of ritual madness and physical abandon, where initiates surrendered to primal forces in acts of both ecstasy and torment. The rites incorporated elements of ritual, humiliation, and painful ordeals, designed to break down social and personal boundaries, allowing the devotee to merge with the divine through dissolution of the self. The Bakshik initiations exemplify the dark intersection of spirituality and violence, where the infliction of suffering was both a method of control and a profound statement of faith. Together, these ancient cults reveal a persistent pattern in secretive ceremonies, the use of painful ordeals and ritual humiliation as mechanisms to enforce transformation and allegiance. The initiates were subjected to acts of devotion through suffering, their previous identities dismantled through symbolic death and physical trial. These ordeals served not only as tests of loyalty, but as essential passages enabling entry into sacred mysteries inaccessible to the uninitiated. The repeated motif of death and rebirth across these rites underscores a shared belief in the necessity of suffering as a conduit to spiritual enlightenment and communal belonging. The Eleusinian mysteries, the Dionysian rites, the Mithraic graded initiations, the Orphic purification trials, the Isis ceremonies, and the Bakshik frenzies collectively illustrate a spectrum of ritualized cruelty embedded within secretive cultic traditions. These rites, although varying in form and intensity, maintained a common purpose: to break down the individual through pain and humiliation, only to reconstruct them as bearers of esoteric knowledge and members of an exclusive spiritual community. The secrecy surrounding these ceremonies was paramount, for it preserved the sanctity of the mysteries and protected the cult from external scrutiny, while simultaneously reinforcing the internal bonds forged through shared suffering. The initiation rites of these ancient cults were more than mere ceremonies. They were transformative crucibles wherein the physical and psychological boundaries of the initiate were tested and expanded. Each painful ordeal and act of ritual humiliation was laden with symbolic meaning, reflecting broader cosmological narratives and religious doctrines. Through these secretive ceremonies, the cults exerted control over their adherents, demanding absolute devotion and fostering a profound sense of belonging through the shared experience of suffering. The initiates, having survived these trials, emerged irrevocably changed, marked by the secret knowledge and the scars of their passage, forever bound to the cult's esoteric world. Thus, the forbidden rites of antiquity stand as stark testaments to the enduring human fascination with the intersection of pain, sacrifice, and spiritual transcendence. These secretive ceremonies, veiled in darkness and punctuated by ritual cruelty, reveal the lengths to which ancient societies would go in pursuit of divine favor and communal identity. They remind us that the path to sacred enlightenment was often paved with suffering, and that the price of entry into these hidden worlds was both physical endurance and the willing acceptance of ritual humiliation. In examining these rites, one confronts the complex and often troubling relationship between faith, fanaticism, and the human capacity for both devotion and cruelty. The psychological and social functions embedded within these forbidden rites reveal a deliberate orchestration of transformation through suffering, secrecy, and symbolic death. Such initiation ceremonies operated as crucibles, dismantling the initiate's prior identity to forge a new, communal self bound to the cult's esoteric mysteries. The employment of taboo experiences, ranging from extreme physical ordeals to ritual humiliation, was not arbitrary but served to create a liminal space, a threshold between the known and the unknown, life and death, the profane and the sacred. Within this suspended state, the initiate was vulnerable to profound psychological change, a rebirth into a new spiritual reality sanctioned by the cult's doctrines. The secrecy surrounding these rites ensured that the knowledge and power conferred upon the initiate remained exclusive, enhancing the social cohesion and hierarchical structure of the group. Pain and suffering, far from being mere punishments, were instrumental acts of devotion that validated the initiate's commitment and loyalty. This pattern of initiation through ordeal was by no means confined to the Mediterranean world. Across disparate cultures and epochs, similar mechanisms of spiritual transformation emerge, underscoring a universal human engagement with ritual violence as a means of accessing the sacred. In ancient India, for instance, the elephant's cult demanded severe physical tests from its adherents, pushing the boundaries of endurance and spiritual commitment to near mystical extremes. These trials, often conducted in secretive ceremonies, were designed not simply as demonstrations of physical strength, but as profound acts of purification and dedication. The pain endured was a testament to the initiate's readiness to transcend ordinary existence and align with divine forces, reinforcing the cult's authority and the initiate's place within its spiritual hierarchy. Similarly, the Druidic initiations of Celtic Europe provide another compelling example of secretive ceremonies aimed at dismantling and remaking the self through ritual hardship. Although historical records remain fragmentary and often speculative, accounts suggest these rites involved prolonged isolation, fasting, and symbolic trials that induced altered states of consciousness. These painful ordeals functioned as gateways to esoteric knowledge and spiritual power, allowing the initiate to traverse the boundaries between the human and the supernatural. The Druidic initiations, steeped in secrecy and ritualized suffering, reflect a shared conviction that spiritual enlightenment demanded sacrifice and surrender, often enacted through deliberate acts of self-denial and endurance. The shamanic initiations of Siberia further illustrate this archetype of transformation through ordeal, where solitary journeys into the wilderness and harsh physical hardships were integral to the rite of passage. The initiate, often isolated from community and subjected to elements of deprivation and symbolic death, underwent a profound spiritual rebirth facilitated by the guidance of ancestral spirits. These ceremonies, characterized by their secretive nature and extreme physical demands, serve to sever the initiate's ties to the mundane world, enabling a reconnection with the spirit realm. The painful ordeals and acts of ritual humiliation involved in these initiations were not gratuitous but purposeful, designed to dismantle the ego and prepare the individual for the responsibilities of spiritual mediation within their society. Taken together, these diverse traditions reveal a consistent theme: the use of forbidden rites as transformative crucibles where pain, secrecy, and ritual humiliation converge to facilitate spiritual rebirth and social integration. The initiate's passage through these ordeals was both an internal and external journey, eroding the boundaries of self and reality in pursuit of a transcendent state. The secret knowledge imparted was inseparable from the experience of suffering endured, binding the initiate through shared trauma and sacred mystery. This interplay of violence and devotion underscores the complex role of ritual cruelty within ancient cults, serving as both a mechanism of control and an expression of profound faith. While the specific forms and intensities of these initiation rites varied widely across cultures, their underlying logic remained remarkably consistent. The deliberate infliction of suffering functioned as a rite of passage, a necessary dissolution of the old self to enable the emergence of a new identity aligned with the cult's spiritual truths. Secrecy was paramount, preserving the sanctity of the mysteries and reinforcing the social cohesion of the group. Ritual humiliation, far from being solely punitive, acted as a symbolic death, stripping the initiate of previous status and ego, thereby facilitating their rebirth into a sacred community. These acts of devotion through suffering were essential to the cult's operation, legitimizing authority and creating a shared experience that transcended individual pain. In examining these forbidden rites across cultural boundaries, it becomes evident that they fulfill critical psychological and social functions within their respective societies. They provide structured frameworks for confronting mortality, identity, and the sacred, transforming initiates into bearers of esoteric knowledge and communal belonging. The painful ordeals endured are not isolated phenomena, but integral to the cult's cosmology and worldview, embedding the initiate within a narrative of death and rebirth that mirrors cosmic cycles. This ritual violence, while severe, is enveloped within a system of meaning that renders suffering a path to transcendence rather than mere cruelty. The universality of these practices invites reflection on the human capacity for both devotion and fanaticism, highlighting the delicate balance between spiritual transformation and the potential for abuse inherent in such secretive, hierarchical systems. The secrecy that protects the mysteries can also shield acts of cruelty from external scrutiny, raising ethical questions about the limits of ritual violence. Understanding these rites in their historical and cultural contexts is essential to avoid sensationalism and to appreciate the profound human quest for meaning that they represent. They remind us that the pursuit of the sacred has often involved traversing the darkest realms of human experience, where pain and humiliation are paradoxically vehicles for spiritual rebirth. Thus, the forbidden rites of ancient and diverse cultures collectively illuminate the intricate relationship between suffering, secrecy, and spiritual transformation. They stand as testament to a widespread human impulse to seek transcendence through ritualized violence, to forge identity and community through shared ordeal, and to negotiate the liminal space between life and death, self and other. These secretive ceremonies, demanding acts of devotion through suffering, compel us to confront the complexities of faith and fanaticism and the enduring human fascination with the mysteries that lie beyond the veil of ordinary existence.